Now, when we're talking about your social story, really what I mean here is managing your digital reputation. People don't think a lot about digital reputation, but it definitely is tied to the online search for your company or for you as an individual. Managing your digital reputation can be a really important thing in this day and age, particularly with young people, but also with businesses and brands. So here's a story that you might have heard of that happened a few years ago and made headlines all over the world. There's a band called Sons of Maxwell, and its leader, Dave Carroll, went out on a flight on United Airlines, and he was flying through Chicago. So it was a long flight. They landed in Chicago, and all of a sudden, when they were sitting on the tarmac, Dave Carroll looked out the window, and he saw some baggage handlers taking his guitar, his $3,000 Taylor guitar, and literally chucking his guitar. His heart sank. He didn't know what he was going to do. The band really wasn't that successful, and they didn't have a ton of money to replace the guitar. So Dave Carroll figured he'd do like any of us would do. He would complain to United, and United would replace his guitar. Unfortunately, they did not do that. They did not listen, and they really didn't pay much attention to his complaint. Well, this went on for a few weeks, and Dave Carroll decided to do the only thing that he knew how to do. He got some friends together, and he wrote a song.
So before I left Chicago, I alerted 3 employees who showed complete indifference towards me. United, united, you broke my Taylor guitar. United, united, some big help you are. You broke it, you should fix it. You're liable, just admit it. I should have flown with someone else or gone by car. 'Cause United breaks guitars.
Well, as I'm sure you can imagine, United eventually did listen to this video and to Dave Carroll. Now, I've been talking about this video for a few years because I think it's a perfect example of how the reputation of a company was damaged and it could have been avoided. But it wasn't until last year that I had a chance to really prove how much damage this did to the United brand. In fact, there was a case study printed on the BBC website that talked about this damage as far as from a financial standpoint. During the time of this campaign, if you can call it that, airlines' share price dropped 10%. This case study also said that this particular video cost United Airlines more than $180 million. $180 million. That's a lot of money for what was a video that cost Dave Carroll about $100. And I think it really proves the point that you need to make sure that you manage your reputation in the digital space and you have an ear to the ground. What I mean by this is you have some type of listening strategy. So you pay attention, whether it's within a simple Google search, to what people are saying about you, and pay attention to what people are saying about you and your brand within many of the different social circles. And hopefully you'll be able to avoid something like this. When you're talking about building your social story, an important element, as we just talked about, was managing your digital reputation, but also talking about how you are socially responsible. There are many organizations who go out there and they support really great causes and they tend not to talk about them. Well, the online space is the perfect place to do that, to talk about these different causes that you support. There's a great example over the past year of a company, a Tex-Mex chain called Chipotle, that did a really good job about talking about sustainable farming, something that was very close to their hearts as a company. Well, they created this video that featured Willie Nelson singing a Coldplay cover, and this video made the rounds and got millions and millions of views. What it was the story about a farmer who had sold out to big factory farms and then over time decided that he wanted to go back to the way things used to be, to his small little farm. And the whole story was just a couple of minutes, and many people watched this story and really patted Chipotle on the back for supporting sustainable farming and their foundation. Turns out that this campaign won a bunch of awards. This one recently featured in Adweek. Also, part of the social media story that you're creating is to tell stories about your brand. So telling stories about how to really create an audience out there and to talk about you in a particular way that's of interest to your community. And these stories can be fairly simple to create, but you really need to have a strategy in place. There's a great quote here from Arthur Germain that talks about brand telling, this term that is fairly new to the social space, talking about a series of brand stories to make your brand relevant to your target market or audience. These can be stories about the company, its products, innovations, or its people. I've already talked about a few different stories from different companies, and these all make up part of their brands, whether they like them or not. Now, the first step is to discover your story. Think about a few key stories that really define who you are as an organization or individual today. Write these stories down. These can be really simple things that you remember from your childhood or entertaining stories from your adult life. For example, in my early years, when I was about 8 years old, my family managed a strip mall where they would go and they would be forced to having to figure out a way to clean up the garbage in the parking lot. Instead of hiring someone to do this, my dad came up with this great idea that his kids could go out there and they could go out in front of the Burger King and pick up garbage before they went to school. This is kind of a funny story, and one of the reasons it's so relevant to who I am today is because it really taught me the power of working hard and doing a really good job and continuing to work throughout hours that perhaps not everybody was comfortable working. The next thing I want to talk about is rewriting your story. So if you have a website and you care about your brand, it's important to write your story into the history section of your website. Get pretty creative with this and have a little fun with this as well. Many of the examples I just talked about as far as businesses' brands, you'll notice there is a lot of humor in some of the videos that they've created to create these brands. And that's really important because humor sells well on the web. So take a few minutes to rewrite your story and include a couple of really great personal stories. Again, start with little small examples and you can always build on that. Share your story. If you're keen to build your personal brand or your company's brand, you really need to get comfortable telling your story and perfect your story. Whether you're including little tidbits of your life on Twitter or weaving anecdotes into various blog posts, you should have a consistent brand message that you're putting out there that is all about your story.